Hi everyone. This week we're talking about Baroque art. And Baroque art was really a response to the Reformation. So we have the breaking off of various people, various groups from the church, and I talked about that last week. And then the Catholic Church, in response, produces this art that is very almost like over dramatic in kind of a counter action. And we would be calling this period then Baroque art, but actually the period we're talking about is the counter Reformation. So it's the church's answer back. Now, when we look at Europe in the 17th century or the 1600s, it's looking pretty much like it looks today as far as countries have been established here. So the first place we're going to start is Rome. Of course, this makes sense since Rome is where the Vatican is. This is where the head of the Catholic Church is. And in the Vatican, it's there is some art that we'll look at. Let me move this. And the first piece that we're looking at is by the artist Bernini. And what he does is he creates this piece, and it's quite large. These are people. So you can see the scale of this is humongous, and it is more than 100 feet high. So the ceiling in this building is also really, really big. He has these twisting columns and references to the Eucharist by the inclusion of grapevines in this. And one thing that you'll notice with the Baroque art is they didn't really like straight lines. There are lots of curved lines in the art. So we have this curved part here, and we have the twisted columns. And then it's like very high drama. So in paintings, you'll have very dark backgrounds with like kind of extreme use of light. So Bernini also created these pieces off of the Vatican. So when we're looking at this, this is the main section of the Vatican, but this is also part of the Vatican. Over in this area is where we find Raphael's painting, the School of Athens. So they were there, and then this obelisk was also here. And so Bernini was asked to create some kind of wall around this existing place that people would gather. And so he decided to make these structures because he felt they looked like arms or hands and reaching out around the people and embracing them. The idea that the church is accepting and embracing. And you'll see at certain times of the year, there's a balcony here. The Pope will come out and he will address the mass of people that gather here. A great example would be for Easter Sunday. You have, hundreds and hundreds of people that come and listen to his mass. So Bernini also creates sculpture. And here is his interpretation of David, and we saw one by Donatello, we saw one by Michelangelo, so now we're seeing one by Bernini. And we say that this is a Baroque interpretation of this story, and of course the story is that David was an Israelite, and then we have Goliath. He was supposed to be this big monster, and then he hits him with a stone that he uses his slingshot to throw the stone at the giant dies, okay? And then he becomes king. Later on, he becomes king of the Israelites. So you should know the story by now because I've said it a couple of times. So what Bernini does is he is catching him in a moment when he is about to swing and fling this rock at the giant. Here is his little satchel, or whatever you want to call it. He has his rocks in, and his slingshot is here. So this is a moment before he kills him. Let's just do a comparison here between Bernini's David and Michelangelo's David. Both exceptional pieces of art. Remember that Michelangelo's David is slightly out of proportion on purpose because it was originally created to be looked up at. It was supposed to be on the top of a building. Okay, so when we're looking at it frontally like this, we're not viewing quite in the right way. But what you'll see right away when you look at these two images, these two sculptures, is that Michelangelo's David is an exquisite piece of art in the way he carves the body, but it's in a very static, still pose, where Bernini catches David in this moment of movement, in this intense face, with this kind of intense emotion that Michelangelo's does not have. And also, I said to you just a minute ago that Baroque art is the extremes. So we have in paintings like a dark background, this extreme use of light. The same here actually for the sculpture. So by twisting the body in this way, we'll create lots of shadows. So you can see a shadow here on the neck. You can see a shadow here on the face very easily, a shadow down here. So by doing this, he is creating this real contrast between light and dark. And remember, this is before electric lights. So this is going to either be by a window, and it's going to be illuminated by sunlight, or it's going to be illuminated by candlelight in a room. So let's move on. See some more of the differences here. And then this is probably the strangest and most interesting of Bernini's work. So again, this is time period of high drama, theatricality. So this is a chapel in Rome, and this is Bernini's piece here. He also has, that I don't have in a slide, there's a balcony here, and there, I believe it's two. It's two or three, I'm forgetting. Men that are intently watching this scene. And they represent the families who, or the people who donated the money to the church to have this created. So now what I just did is I just zoomed in. So we're going to zoom in on this piece. There's actually a window behind this that you do not see, which is quite ingenious of him. So these rods made of gold, they actually have natural sunlight that come down and illuminate this. And it's very mysterious how the sunlight is coming into this space, because you don't see the window when you stand in front of it. So it's, again, this idea of the light of God and this kind of very dramatic way of showing it. He also has this almost like a cantilever where it's pushed out into the viewer's space and nothing underneath it. So we know, of course, it's attached to the wall and there's supports behind it and everything. But when you look at it, it really does look like, it's hovering on a cloud and there's light coming down and everything. Okay, so it's quite amazing in that sense. Then this is the story of Saint Teresa. Okay, so she writes in her journals about God sending an angel to her, and the angel piercing her with a hot arrow numerous times until she reaches a state of ecstasy. So this is the moment that Bernini is depicting this, and she writes about this, and she actually had quite a following when she was alive. So you see her face, it really looks like the state of ecstasy. We have the angel here with the arrow who's going to pierce her body. So if you follow where I just put the cursor here, we see that there's actually more of a sexual implication here of ecstasy than something that is just God coming and talking to me and I get all excited. And that's really the way it was meant to be read when Bernini created this. So it seems kind of strange that with the Counter-Reformation and this Baroque art that there would be, and it's all like religious associated with the church, that there would be these sexual implications in it. But we'll see again and again this week that that is true, that we have a lot of sexual implications in the artwork. What I'm showing you here is a building in Rome created by the artist Borromini, and this fits into Baroque architecture. You can see if you look at the top here right away, because I talked about how everything tends to be curved and not straight. So you begin to see the curved elements. It's an interesting piece of architecture because he was given the space to create this, and yet what he envisioned in his head was too small. The space was too small for it. So he came up with some very interesting ways around that. And one way was, instead of using the typical circle, he starts to use these ovals. Touches on it, really becomes part of the Baroque language of architecture. So you can see here, this is the church entrance here, and instead of a round dome, he has this oval dome. And here it is as you're looking up at it. So again, it's really interesting that the idea that made him come up with this was a lack of space, and this was his solution. But it was so well received then that it gets repeated in other architecture, in other buildings, and becomes really part of Baroque architecture.